everyone, welcome back to Pages of Globe. Today I'm going to be reading to you the short story, The Cats of Ulthar by H.P. Lovecraft. Before we start, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the author and then we'll jump straight into the story. So H.P. Lovecraft is a pretty popular and famous author. He was born on August 20th, 1890 in Providence, Rhode Island and died on March 15th, 1937. He was an American author of fantastic and macabre short novels and stories, and he was one of the 20th century masters of the Gothic tale of terror. Lovecraft was interested in science from childhood, but his lifelong poor health prevented him from attending college. He made his living as a ghostwriter and rewrite man, and spent most of his life in seclusion and poverty. His fame as a writer increased greatly after his death. So H.P. Lovecraft is a very famous author, I would say. One of the most special things about him is that he is known as the father of cosmic horror, which at that time was a completely new category in the horror genre. It emphasizes the insignificance of humankind in the cold and fundamentally alien universe. Even in the short story, you're going to see some very interesting, kind of weird, creepy kind of animals and creatures. And that just kind of shows because, according to him at least, there was a myriad of other beings far more powerful and ancient than humans in this universe. Now, some of these things were so monumental and supreme that their very existence goes far beyond our comprehension. So, for H.P. Lovecraft, he kind of deemed humanity as worthless in the grand scheme of things. Now, H.P. Lovecraft is said to be kind of crazy. Both his mother and father were separately committed to the same mental institution, and they had many psychological issues. He rarely ever went out in public during daylight. He really only left the house after sunset, and he would stay up late to study science and astronomy, which, fun fact, he actually wanted to be a professional astronomer, but like I said before, he was never able to finish high school as he was a very sickly child. Something very interesting about him was that he was actually best buddies with Harry Houdini, the incredibly famous magician. In fact, he actually wrote a few stories about or inspired by Harry Houdini, like Under the Pyramids, which was inspired by when Houdini was telling his apparently true tale about being kidnapped by an Egyptian tour guide and then encountering the deity who inspired the Great Sphinx of Giza, which Lovecraft concluded was complete rubbish, but he settled for a big advance and wrote the story Under the Pyramids, which Houdini loved and kept seeking out work for Lovecraft until his death in 1926. Now, the story I'm going to be reading to you, The Cats of Ulthar, is immensely popular, especially for H.P. Lovecraft fans, and something cool about it that I realized when I was researching it was there's actually an entire card game based upon this too. The Cats of Ulthar is a pretty short story, which is just about a small town, Ulthar, in which cats are you can't kill cats. It's banned to kill cats. And it just kind of goes through the entire story of why cats are now banned from being killed in Ulthar. And it's a very creepy story. And honestly, if I could sum everything up in one word, I would just say weird. That is the one word I could give for you if I needed to describe the entire story in one word. And I could probably say that for almost all of H.P. Lovecraft's book. It was weird, kind of creepy, but that was his entire genre. Another little interesting tidbit that I noticed about this author was that actually one of my favorite shows of all time is surprisingly Scooby-Dooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, which is an incredibly childish show. It's meant for children, but I think that the plot of it is absolutely incredible and very well made, and it's so it's filled with twists. And one of the very famous quote unquote authors in that series is called H.P. Hatecraft, and he actually has this series called I don't even know what it's called, but one of his most famous selling books is Chargar Gothicum, which is about this crazy monster from another universe. And H.P. Hatecraft is always talking about how humanity is a very small dot in the grand scheme of things, and there are hundreds of other universes out there from which aliens are coming in, and there's all these creatures and other dimensions. And honestly, whenever I was watching him, like, it automatically reminded me of H.P. Lovecraft, and I was like, I completely see where they got the inspiration down from, and like down to the name. So that was just a little interesting tidbit I wanted to share. But without further ado, let's get on with the story. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like to read next. The Cats of Ulthar by H.P. Lovecraft. It is said that in Ulthar, which lies beyond the river sky, no man may kill a cat, and this I can verily believe, as I gaze upon him who sitteth purring before the fire. For the cat is cryptic and close to strange things which men cannot see. He is the soul of antique Aegyptus and bearer of tales from forgotten cities in Meroe and Ophir. He is the kin of jungle lords and heir to the secrets of hoary and sinister Africa. The Sphinx is his cousin, and he speaks her language, but he is more ancient than the Sphinx and remembers that which she hath forgotten. In Ulthar, before the burgesses ever forbade the killing of cats, there dwelt an old cotter and his wife, who delighted to trap and slay the cats of their neighbors. Why they did this, I do not know, save that many hate the voice of the cat in the night, and think it ill that cats should run stealthily about the yards and gardens at twilight. But whatever the reason, this old man and woman took pleasure in trapping and slaying every cat which came near to their hovel. And from some of the sounds heard after dark, many villagers fancied that the manner of slaying was exceedingly peculiar. But the villagers did not discuss such things with the old man and his wife, because of the habitual expression of the withered faces of those two, and because their cottage was so small and so darkly hidden under spreading oaks at the back of a neglected yard. In truth, as much as the owners of the cats hated these old folks, they feared them more, and instead of berating them as brutal assassins, they merely took care that no cherished pet or monsieur should stray towards the remote hovel under the dark trees. When through some unavoidable oversight a cat was missed and sounds heard after dark, the loser would lament impotently or console himself by thanking fate that it was not one of his children who thus vanished. For the people of Ulthar were simple and knew not whence it is all cats first came. One day a caravan of strange wanderers from the south entered the narrow cobbled streets of Ulthar. Dark wanderers they were, and unlike the other roving folk who passed through the village twice every year, in the marketplace they told fortunes for silver and bought gay beads from the merchants. What was the land of these wanderers no one could tell, but it was seen that they were given to strange prayers, and they had painted on the sides of their wagons strange figures with human bodies and the heads of cats, hawks, rams, and lions. And the leader of the caravan wore a headdress with 2 horns and curious disc between the horns. There was in the single caravan a little boy with no father or mother, but only a tiny black kitten to cherish. The plague had not been kind to him, yet had left him this furry small thing to mitigate his sorrow. And when one is very young, one can find great relief in the lively antics of a black kitten. So the boy, whom the dark people called Menace, smiled more often than he wept, as he sat playing with his graceful kitten on the steps of an oddly painted wagon. On the 3rd morning of the wanderers' stayed in Ulthar, Menace could not find his kitten, as he sobbed aloud in the marketplace. Villagers told him of the old man and his wife, and any of sounds heard at night. When he heard these things, his sobbing gave place to meditation, and finally to prayer. He stretched out his arms towards the sun and prayed in a tongue no villager could understand, though indeed the villagers did not try very hard to understand, since their attention was mostly taken up by the sky and the odd shapes the clouds were assuming. It was very peculiar, but as the boy uttered his petition, there seemed to form overhead the shadowy, nebulous figures of exotic things, of hybrid creatures crowned with horn-flanked discs. Nature is full of such inspirations to impress the imaginative. That night the wanderers left Ulthar and were never seen again, and the householders were troubled when they noticed that in all the village there was not a cat to be found. From each hearth the familiar cat had vanished, cats large and small, black and gray, striped, yellow and white. Old Cranon, the burgomaster, swore that the dark folk had taken the cats away in revenge for the killing of Mena's kitten, and cursed the caravan and little boy. But Nith, the lean notary, declared that the old cotter and his wife were more likely persons to suspect, for their hatred of cats were notorious and increasingly bold. Still, no one durst complain to the sinister couple. Even the little Atal, the innkeeper's son, vowed that he had seen at twilight all the cats of Ulthar in that accursed yard under the trees, pacing very slowly and solemnly in a circle around the cottage, two abreast, as if in performance of some unheard rite of beasts. The villagers did not know how much to believe from so small a boy, and they feared that the evil pair had charmed the cats to their death. They preferred not to chide the old cotter till they meet him outside his dark and repellent yard. So Ulthar went to sleep in vain anger, and when people awakened at dawn, every cat was back at his accustomed hearth. Large and small, black and gray, striped, yellow and white. None was missing. Very sleek and fat did the cats appear, and sonorous with purring content. The citizens talked with one another of the affair, marveled not a little. Old Cranon again insisted that it was the dark folk who had taken them, since cats did not return alive from the cottage of ancient man and his wife, but all agreed on one thing, that the refusal of all the cats to eat their portions of meat or drink their saucers of milk was exceedingly curious. And for 2 whole days the sleek, lazy cats of Ulthar would touch no food, but only doze by the fire or in the sun. It was fully a week before the villagers noticed that no lights were appearing at dusk in the windows of the cottage underneath the trees. Then the lean Nith remarked that no one had seen the old man or his wife since the nights the cats were away. In another week the burgomaster decided to overcome his fears and call at the strangely silent dwelling as a matter of duty, though in so doing he was careful to take with him Shane the blacksmith and Thul the cutter of stones as witnesses. And when they had broken down the frail door, they found only this: 2 cleanly picked human skeletons on the earthen floor, and a number of singular beetles crawling in shadowy corners. There was subsequently much talk among the burgesses of Ulthar. Zat the coroner disputed at length with Nith, the lean notary, and Krang and Shang and Thul were overwhelmed with questions. Even little Atal, the innkeeper's son, was closely questioned and given a sweetmeat as a reward. They talked of the old cotter and his wife, of the caravan dark wanderers, and small Menes and his black kitten, of the prayer of Menes and the sky during that prayer, of the doings of the cats on the night the caravan left, and what was later found in the cottage underneath the trees in the repellent yard. And in the end the burgesses passed that a remarkable law which is told by traders in Hetheg and discussed by travelers in Nur, namely, that in Ulthar no man may kill a cat. Alright, so that was The Cats of Ulthar by H.P. Lovecraft. And as you can see in the beginning when I was talking about how it was kind of weird, that was basically what I was talking about. H.P. Lovecraft's The Cats of Ulthar is a pretty interesting book. Lovecraft was, as I said before, the father of horror and brother to mystery, and his stories have lived for generations and will undoubtedly live for many more, as his creations find life in almost every single modern-day horror story. The Cats of Ulthar was a short story written in June 1920 and published in the November of the same year. Like most Lovecraft stories, the narrator stays nameless as they explain the story of Ulthar, a town where killing cats is now illegal, which kind of seems like a strange rule, but at the same time you're like, why would anyone want to kill cats? It goes back to when an old couple lived in the town. The couple enjoyed capturing and killing the cats the people of Ulthar owned if they were ever, making noise at night, which often cats do. They, meow and stuff. But one day, a caravan passes through town, and among the caravan people is Menes, an orphan boy. He has a small kid with him who basically also presumed an orphan, so him and Menes have like a very special connection. But when the cat suddenly disappears, the townspeople tell Menes, oh yeah, the couple probably killed it because they hate cats. So Menes becomes like automatically very depressed, and he starts praying. And like the clouds start changing, weird stuff starts happening, and the next day, boom, all the cats are gone. And it's like, what is happening? At first they're like, oh, it might have been the caravan, but soon enough they're like, wait, what if it's the old couple? Because, they hate cats. So they finally decide to go in there, and when they do, they see that it's just like the couple sitting there, and it's just skeleton. Like there's no skin, and it's just an awful, like probably picture to see. It's an awful scene to see, and it's an awful picture painted. And it's presumed that the cats basically just ate them. They swarmed the old couple's house and they ate them. The townspeople have no idea what happened, and the cats in the town are spending a few days and they're just lazing about, refusing to eat, meaning they're obviously full. And they have like very sleek coats, like they're looking very posh, and they look great. And so once the townspeople kind of put together that, okay, these cats have killed this couple, they kind of realize that, okay, a rule must be created that no cats can be killed in the town of Ulthar. Now, before we get on to the true analysis of the story, I do want to give you some background that Lovecraft wrote the story in his early period. So during this time, he was more influenced by other writers rather than he still hadn't he had found his genre, but he was still being more influenced. So this particular story was actually inspired by Lord Dunsany, an Anglo-Irish writer. So other stories inspired by Dunsany's writers are also The White Ship, The Street, The Terrible Old Man, which was actually written 5 months before The Cats of Ulthar, and others during his early writing stages. Now, from Dunsany, Lovecraft got his inspiration for mystery and the flow of words. Lovecraft was not shy about his inspiration and made it evident he was trying to emulate him. Another famous author who you might notice mimic styles is Stephen King, who enjoys writing in the same style as whatever he's currently reading. And I've noticed that I often do that too. If I'm picking up a short story collection to find one to read for you guys, I often find that kind of weaving into my short story. Like just last year when I was reading many horror stories, that's around the time I sent out Yuki Onna. That's when I wrote my own horror story. And it was the first time I'd ever written one, but I was very passionate about it. I was yes, I'm going to write this. And so I do think that whatever you're reading does end up cropping up in your writing. And if it's not, then that's okay. But I think it is important to be influenced by other authors. Now back to the story. Menes. Menes is this character he's kind of the main pivot point. He's the one that's the reader can kind of presume that maybe he was the one that even started this whole thing. And the name Menes is actually linked all the way back to Egypt. And he was the first recorded king of Egypt who was said to have united Lower and Upper Egypt. Menes means he who endures. Now, cats were seen as royalty and praised in ancient Egypt. Cats were said to have killed venomous snakes and to protect the pharaoh. In the story, we're aware that the one thing the boy has is the kitten, and vice versa. So the two are basically protecting each other in similar relationship to cats and kings back in the ancient times, from where the name Menes is even from. If anyone killed a cat in ancient Egypt, they were basically sent to death, even if the killing was a complete accident. Now, even though it's never stated, it can be assumed that, as I said before, Menes has put a curse on the old couple and maybe the town of Ulthar itself. It's said that after the couple was killed, a law was put into motion that no one kills cats in the town of Ulthar. If another cat is killed in the town, will the murderer end up with the same fate as the old couple? The murder of the old couple can relate to the death of anyone who killed a cat in ancient Egypt, with a horrific Lovecraftian twist. Instead of people killing the old couple, the cats of Ulthar devoured them. This twist leaves a gory and emotional picture in the reader's head. in some dark and twisted way, were supposed to find satisfaction in their cruel end, which does kind of make sense because if you think about it, this couple was absolutely awful, and the fate that they received was way worse than what they probably would have received in ancient Egypt. They would have just been killed, not eaten by cats. But at the same time, this couple was absolutely evil. Before we end off, I do want to kind of give you a few connections into other Lovecraft stories because I personally really do love reading Lovecraft stories. And the Cats of Ulthar is, honestly, unsurprisingly, linked to other Lovecraftian stories. For example, another story, The Other Gods, tells an adult in The Other Gods who once lived in Ulthar and is the son of the innkeeper, who was one of the people in the story, if you remember. He was the one that actually saw the cats circling the house of this old couple, and he was the one that no one was sure if they should believe or not. In another Lovecraft story, The Rats in the Walls, cats are mentioned to embody horror, and there are so many other connections. Honestly, I really love this short story because it's so creepy, but you really do have to research a lot to get to the base. I had no idea this had anything to do all the way back to ancient Egypt. The only way I kind of knew about it was because I had my own phase where I was obsessed with Egyptian mythology. Otherwise, I really would have never thought about this at all. But yeah, oftentimes you will even see in tombs and crypts that cats are drawn. Cats were also supposed to be thought of they were going to help you enter the afterlife. They were greatly revered in ancient Egypt. And Menes was a name that I kind of did automatically recognize, especially if you were a fan of the Egyptians novel series by Rick Riordan, like I was when I was way younger. But yeah, that's it for today. And I hope you had a wonderful time. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like to hear next.